My father made me drop out of college to work in his business for free. Years later, he sold it without giving me a dime. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you sacrificed your entire future for them, only to have them turn around and stab you in the back? What I'm about to tell you is not some fictional drama or made-up story for views. This is my real life, and the person who betrayed me was the one who was supposed to protect me the most. My own father convinced me to abandon my dreams, work like a slave for years, and then walked away with everything while leaving me with absolutely nothing. Stay with me because this story gets darker than you can imagine, and the ending, well, you won't believe how it all turned out. I was 19 years old, full of dreams and ambitions, standing at the threshold of my sophomore year in college. I was studying business administration at a decent university, making good grades and actually enjoying the whole college experience. My friends and I had plans. You know the kind of plans young people make about conquering the world and building something amazing together. I had a girlfriend, a social life, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was on a path that was truly mine. But then my father called me into his office one evening and everything changed in a way I never saw coming. He sat me down with this serious expression on his face, the kind that immediately makes your stomach drop. My father owned a small manufacturing business that made custom metal parts for various industries. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and then some. He told me he was getting older, that the business was growing beyond what he could handle alone, and that he needed someone he could trust to help him take it to the next level. Then came the words that would alter the trajectory of my entire life in ways I couldn't possibly understand at that moment. He said he wanted me to drop out of college and come work with him full-time, learning the business from the ground up so that one day it would all be mine. I remember sitting there, completely torn between two futures that seemed to pull me in opposite directions. On one hand, I had my college education, my independence, and the freedom to figure out who I wanted to become. On the other hand, here was my father offering me what seemed like a golden opportunity, a ready-made business that I would inherit. He painted this beautiful picture of father and son working side by side, building an empire together, creating a legacy that would support our family for generations. He told me that college was just theory, but real business experience with him would be worth 10 degrees. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags that I completely missed because I trusted him with everything I had. The pressure he put on me was subtle but incredibly effective, the kind that makes you think you're making your own choice when really you're being manipulated. He talked about family loyalty, about how blood is thicker than water, about how disappointed he was that I would even consider putting my own selfish desires above the family. He brought my mother into the conversation, who naturally took his side, and talked about how this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They made me feel like I was being ungrateful, like I was throwing away something precious that other people would kill to have. Within 2 weeks, I had withdrawn from university, said goodbye to my friends, broke up with my girlfriend because long distance seemed pointless, and started showing up at my father's factory at 6 in the morning every single day. Those first few months were brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated, but I told myself it was all part of paying my dues. My father had me doing everything, from sweeping the factory floor to operating heavy machinery to managing inventory spreadsheets until midnight. I was working 12 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week, and my father kept saying this was necessary to learn every aspect of the business. He said I couldn't manage people if I didn't understand what they did, which made sense at the time. But here's the thing that should have been a massive warning sign. I wasn't getting paid a single dollar. My father's logic was since I was family and since this was going to be my business someday, I was essentially investing in my own future. He gave me a small allowance for gas and food, but that was it. I watched as other employees, some of whom had been there for years, collected their paychecks every 2 weeks while I got nothing. When I brought this up to my father, he got angry and accused me of being greedy and short-sighted. He said he was providing me with something far more valuable than money. He was giving me knowledge, experience, and a future ownership stake in a profitable business. He showed me the books and demonstrated how much the business was making, implying that someday soon, all of this profit would flow to me. He made me feel stupid for even thinking about a paycheck when I was supposedly being groomed to own the entire operation. So I shut up and kept working, believing that my sacrifice now would pay off exponentially later. Years went by, and I'm not talking about just a year or two. I'm talking about 6 full years of my life disappearing into this business. I went from 19 years old to 25 years old, watching all my former classmates graduate, start careers, get married, and build lives while I was stuck in this weird limbo. My social life completely vanished because I was always working. I had no money to go out even when I had time off, and I became increasingly isolated. My father kept dangling the carrot of ownership in front of me, always saying it would happen soon, that he was just waiting for the right moment. He'd say things like, "Once we land this big contract, we'll formalize your partnership," or "After we expand the facility, I'll transfer shares to you." Meanwhile, the business was actually thriving, partly because my father had what amounted to a free executive working 80-hour weeks. I had taken on more and more responsibility, managing client relations, overseeing production, even handling some of the financial planning. I had become indispensable to the operation, and my father knew it. Other family members started making comments about how I was wasting my youth, how I should be out building my own life, but I defended my father every single time. I truly believed I was building something, that all this sacrifice was part of a bigger plan. I thought I was being smart and strategic, playing the long game while everyone else chased short-term gains. Then one Tuesday afternoon, everything came crashing down in the most devastating way possible, and I mean that literally. My father called me into his office, which wasn't unusual, but this time his lawyer was there too. My heart actually started racing because I thought this was finally it, the moment he was going to make me a partner or sign over part of the business. Instead, my father looked at me with this cold expression I'd never seen before and told me he had sold the business. Just like that. 6 words that destroyed everything I had worked for. He had been in negotiations for months with a larger manufacturing company that wanted to acquire his operation, and he had just closed the deal. The sale price was substantial. We're talking several $1,000,000, and I sat there in complete shock trying to process what this meant for me. I asked him about my stake, about the partnership we had discussed 1,000 times, about the ownership he had promised me since I was 19 years old. His response is something I will never forget as long as I live. He said there had never been any formal agreement, that I had no legal claim to the business, and that he had made no promises, only suggestions about what might happen in the future. He actually tried to gaslight me, claiming that I had misunderstood our conversations and that he had never guaranteed me anything in writing. I completely lost it in that office, yelling and demanding to know how he could do this to me after everything I had sacrificed. I brought up the 6 years of free labor, the abandoned education, the lost relationships, the complete derailment of my youth and future prospects. My father remained eerily calm and told me that I had received valuable experience and free room and board at home, which he considered more than fair compensation. He said I was being dramatic and ungrateful, that he had given me an opportunity to learn business at the highest level, and that I should be thanking him instead of causing a scene. His lawyer just sat there, taking notes, not saying a word, but I could tell this had all been carefully planned and rehearsed. When I threatened to sue him, the lawyer finally spoke up and explained in condescending legal terms that I had no case whatsoever. I had never been an employee on paper, never received a W-2, never signed a partnership agreement, and never been promised anything in writing. Legally, I had been volunteering at a family business, which is apparently completely legal no matter how unethical it is. The lawyer suggested that if I pursued legal action, it would cost me tens of thousands in legal fees only to lose, and furthermore, my father could potentially sue me for defamation if I went around telling people he had stolen from me. I was trapped, legally helpless, and my own father knew it and had orchestrated the entire thing. I moved out of my parents' house that same week, crashing on a friend's couch because I literally had almost no money saved up. My father actually seemed surprised that I was upset, like he genuinely couldn't understand why I felt betrayed. My mother took his side completely, saying that business is business and that I needed to grow up and stop being so emotional about everything. She suggested that I should be happy for my father's success and focus on building my own life now. The lack of empathy from both of them was staggering, like I was the crazy one for expecting some basic fairness and honesty after dedicating my entire young adult life to his company. The next few months were probably the darkest period of my entire existence, and I don't say that lightly. I was 25 years old with no degree, no work experience that I could prove on paper, no professional references because my only employer was my father, and no money to start over. I fell into a serious depression where some days I couldn't even get out of bed. I had given up everything for a lie, and the person who had lied to me was supposed to love me unconditionally. I started seeing a therapist who helped me understand that what my father had done was a form of exploitation and abuse, which was hard to accept because society tells us that parents always have our best interests at heart. Finding work was incredibly difficult because I had this weird 6-year gap that I couldn't really explain to potential employers without sounding insane. If I said I had been working at my father's company, they would ask why I left and why he wouldn't give me a reference. If I said I had been doing freelance consulting or entrepreneurship, they would want to see evidence of my work or clients. I felt completely stuck and worthless, like my father had not only stolen my past, but had also sabotaged my future. I took a minimum wage job at a warehouse just to survive, and every day felt like a reminder of how far I had fallen from where I thought I would be. But something shifted in me during those dark months, a kind of angry determination that I had never felt before. I decided that I wasn't going to let my father's betrayal define the rest of my life, that I was going to build something on my own even if it killed me. I started reading everything I could about business, taking free online courses, networking with anyone who would talk to me, and hustling in ways I never had before. I realized that while my father had screwed me over financially and professionally, he had actually taught me a lot about running a business, even if that had never been his intention. I knew manufacturing, I understood supply chains, I knew how to manage people and negotiate with clients. I started doing freelance consulting for small manufacturing businesses, helping them optimize their operations and reduce costs. At first, the money was almost nothing, barely enough to cover rent, but slowly I started building a reputation. One client led to another, and within a year I had enough clients to quit my warehouse job and do consulting full-time. I was making decent money, not amazing, but enough to feel like I was finally moving forward instead of drowning. The best part was that everything I built was mine. There was no one who could take it away from me. No one I had to trust who might betray me. My father, meanwhile, was living his best life with his millions from the sale, traveling the world and buying expensive things. He tried to reach out to me a few times through my mother, suggesting we should get together for dinner like nothing had happened. I ignored every single attempt at contact because I genuinely had nothing to say to him. My mother kept pushing, saying that life is short and family is important, but she didn't seem to grasp that what he had done was unforgivable. Some people told me I should try to reconcile and forgive for my own peace of mind, but honestly, cutting him out of my life completely was the most peaceful decision I ever made. About 3 years after he sold the business, something absolutely beautiful happened that felt like the universe finally balancing the scales. My consulting work had grown significantly, and I had partnered with 2 other consultants to form an actual consulting firm. We specialized in helping small to medium manufacturing businesses increase efficiency and profitability, and we were getting more business than we could handle. One day, a potential client reached out asking for help with a manufacturing facility they had recently acquired that was underperforming badly. When they sent over the details, my jaw literally dropped because it was my father's old business. The company that had bought my father's business had discovered within months that he had been cooking the books and inflating the profitability numbers. They had paid way too much for an operation that was actually struggling and outdated. The facility was losing money, employees were quitting because of mismanagement, and several major clients had left because quality had declined. The acquiring company was desperate to turn it around, or they would have to shut it down completely and eat a massive loss. They had heard about my firm through industry connections and wanted to hire us to do a complete overhaul of the operation. I accepted the contract immediately, and I won't lie, there was definitely an element of poetic justice that felt incredibly satisfying. I walked back into that factory that I had spent 6 years of my life in, but this time I was the one in charge, getting paid extremely well and holding all the power. The employees who remembered me were shocked to see me return in this capacity, and several of them privately told me that everything had gone downhill after my father left. I spent 3 months completely restructuring the operation, implementing new systems, retraining staff, and rebuilding relationships with former clients. The turnaround was remarkable, and within 6 months, the facility was profitable again. The acquiring company was so impressed that they offered me a permanent position as a regional director overseeing multiple facilities, with a salary that was more than I had ever imagined making. But even better than that, they offered me an equity stake in the company, actual legal ownership that was documented and binding. I accepted without hesitation, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had finally gotten what was supposed to be mine all along. I was part owner of a successful manufacturing operation, except this time I had earned it legitimately, and no one could ever take it away from me. Word eventually got back to my father about my success, and suddenly he wanted to reconnect and be proud of me. He actually called me directly, which shocked me because we hadn't spoken in years. He tried to take credit for my success, saying that everything he had taught me had clearly paid off and that he had been right all along about the value of practical experience. He suggested we should let bygones be bygones and that maybe I could help him invest his money in some new business ventures. The audacity was absolutely stunning, like he truly believed we could just pretend nothing had happened. I told him very calmly that he taught me exactly one valuable lesson, which was to never trust anyone who claims to have your best interests at heart while exploiting you for their own gain. I said that my success had nothing to do with him and everything to do with my own determination to recover from what he had done to me. I made it crystal clear that I wanted nothing from him, not his money, not his advice, not the presence in my life. His response was predictable. He got angry and defensive, calling me ungrateful and spiteful, saying I was holding a grudge over nothing. That was the last conversation we ever had. My mother continued to pressure me occasionally to forgive him, especially as my father got older and his health started declining. She used the classic emotional manipulation tactics, saying that I would regret it when he was gone, that I was being cruel, that he was my father no matter what. But I had done enough therapy by this point to recognize toxic guilt-tripping when I heard it. I maintained my boundaries firmly, and eventually she stopped asking. I wasn't being cruel. I was simply protecting myself from someone who had already proven he would hurt me if it benefited him. Today, I'm in my mid-30s, and my life is completely different from what I imagined when I was 19, but also better in many ways. I'm a partner in a successful consulting firm, I have equity in multiple businesses, and I've built everything through my own merit and hard work. I eventually went back to school part-time and finished my degree, which felt like reclaiming something that had been stolen from me. I'm in a healthy relationship with someone who actually respects and values me, something I didn't think was possible after being betrayed by the person who was supposed to model what love looks like. The story of what my father did to me still makes me angry sometimes, especially when I think about those 6 years I can never get back. I missed out on so much: the college experience, developing friendships, exploring who I was as a person, making mistakes and learning from them on my own terms. He took all of that from me for his own benefit and felt completely justified doing it. But I've also learned that holding on to anger and bitterness only hurts me, not him. He's off living his life without any apparent guilt or regret, and obsessing over the injustice won't change what happened. What I've gained from this nightmare is something that money can't buy: a crystal clear understanding of my own worth, and an absolute refusal to let anyone exploit me again. I've learned to get everything in writing, to trust actions rather than words, and to walk away from situations where I'm not being valued properly. I've learned that family doesn't automatically deserve loyalty just because of shared DNA. That loyalty has to be earned through consistent love and respect. These lessons have made me successful in business because I can spot manipulation and bad deals from a mile away. I sometimes wonder what my life would have been like if I had just told my father no when I was 19, if I had stood up for myself and stayed in college. Maybe I would be further ahead professionally. Maybe I would have made different connections and opportunities would have opened up sooner. But I also know that the path I ended up taking, as painful as it was, taught me resilience and self-reliance in a way that a traditional path never could have. I built myself up from absolute zero, with no help from anyone, and there's a certain pride in that. To anyone listening who might be in a similar situation, where family or someone you trust is asking you to sacrifice your future for vague promises, please learn from my mistake. Get everything in writing. Every promise, every agreement, every expectation should be documented legally. If someone truly has your best interests at heart, they will have no problem putting their promises on paper. If they refuse or get defensive when you ask for written agreements, that's a massive red flag that they're planning to screw you over. Don't let anyone, not even family, especially not family, convince you that trust should replace legal protection. I want to be clear that I don't regret cutting my father out of my life completely, and I've never wavered on that decision even once. Some people find that shocking or harsh, but they didn't live through what I lived through. They didn't feel the soul-crushing betrayal of having 6 years of their youth stolen by the person who was supposed to protect them. They didn't experience the gaslighting and manipulation when trying to hold that person accountable. Forgiveness is not something I owe to someone who has never genuinely apologized or shown any remorse for their actions. The ultimate irony is that my father's betrayal, as devastating as it was, ultimately pushed me to become more successful than I probably would have been otherwise. If he had actually followed through on his promises and made me a partner, I would have been comfortable and complacent in a decent but unexceptional business. Instead, losing everything forced me to rebuild with a fierce determination and entrepreneurial spirit that has taken me much further. I don't thank him for this because the ends don't justify the means, but I do acknowledge that adversity can forge strength if you choose to use it that way rather than let it destroy you. So, that's my story. The complete and unfiltered truth about how my own father convinced me to sacrifice everything for him and then walked away with millions while leaving me with nothing. It's not a feel-good story. There's no heartwarming reconciliation at the end, no moment where he realizes what he did wrong and makes amends. Real life is often messier and less satisfying than fiction. But it is a story of survival and recovery, of refusing to let someone else's cruelty define your worth or limit your potential. If my experience can help even one person avoid making the same mistakes I made, or give them hope that they can recover from betrayal, then something good will have come from all that pain. I've learned that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so successful and fulfilling that the person who wronged you becomes completely irrelevant to your happiness. My father is just a footnote in my story now, a cautionary tale about misplaced trust, but he's not the main character anymore. I am the main character of my life, and I've written myself a pretty damn good second act. To everyone out there who has been betrayed by someone they loved and trusted, I want you to know that you can recover, you can rebuild, and you can create something beautiful from the ashes of what was destroyed. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but it is absolutely possible if you refuse to give up on yourself, even when others have given up on you.